Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Helft mir, Gott gute preisen, which translates to help me to praise God's goodness. This is a pretty interesting chorale. It has some modal quirks to it. Definitely has an interesting modulation structure too. Lots of mid-phrase modulations that don't result in a cadence being in the same key, and we pretty much are starting right off the bat with that same theme of modulating to a key and then not cadencing in it. So my analysis is definitely a bit more angular than it is usually, but hopefully my explanation justifies it. So we start on A minor, we end on A major. There's no key signature, so I reckon we start in the key of A minor with this tonic triad in root position. We have a passing seventh in the bass, and then immediately afterwards we get an F major triad, F, C, F, and A, which would be 6 in the key of A minor. However, I think that this F major chord, believe it or not, is functioning like a 4 in the key of C major. It's just what it sounds like to me, and it feels like the progression afterwards justifies this analysis as a modulation. If we look ahead, we have E, D, F, and B. However, this E is an accented non-chord tone, and what we actually have here is a B diminished chord in first inversion, which is B diminished over D. Sorry, I had some brain fog there. B diminished over D, which is 7/6, and then on this beat we get E, G, G, and C, which is our tonic triad in root position. So this 4-7-1 progression really makes this section feel like it's in the key of C major, albeit brief, because this C major triad I think is taking it, and it's also in first inversion. Sorry, I didn't notate that or analyze that way. This C major triad is now our 4 in the key of G major. We get F sharp right afterwards, and you know, it's possible that we're in C Lydian, and that's what makes this phrase sound as odd as it does, harmonically speaking. I look at this as a half cadence, an inverted half cadence, where we don't get the chord in root position here. It doesn't sound like C Lydian to me. This F sharp going to G just sounds too much like a leading tone going to a tonic, and it's supported by the harmony too. So we get a little mid-phrase C major tonicization. I think it goes over the tonicization line into the modulation line, so that's why I analyzed it like this, and this is going to be a recurring theme. We're going to see it once or twice more. So then we get F sharp, D, A, and D. That is a D major triad in first inversion. We get lots of inverted chords here. G, D, G, and B. That is our tonic triad, G major in root position. That's usually where 5-6 goes at least. And then we get F sharp, E, G, and B. However, it's most likely that this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone, and what we're actually getting is E, E, G, and C, which is a C major triad in first inversion, so that would be our 4 chord. And you know, you could make an argument that this is like, 5 going to 1 in the key of C major, and this D major triad is just like a Lydian cadence or something like that, but I'm really not aware of that being conventional. Then again, this chorale isn't super conventional harmonically. I'm analyzing it in a way that makes sense to me to try and bring the functional harmony out of it, which it definitely is there. So the fact that this looks like 1 going to 4 going to 5, because this is a D major triad in first inversion. The only thing that's odd about this cadence is that it's inverted. Usually half cadences are in root position, and then they'll resolve to the tonic. But what's interesting about this cadence in particular is if we take a look at the bass line, we have E, F sharp, G sharp, A. It's melodic minor In comparison to E, F sharp, G natural, we have E, F sharp, G sharp. And I think this F sharp is a cheeky way to introduce the idea of A melodic minor as a pivot chord. And this is now uppercase 4-6, so a major 4 chord, which is a byproduct of harmonizing the melodic minor scale. And it makes sense afterwards because we get a normative progression. We get G sharp, B, E, and E, which is our 5 chord in the key of E minor. In first inversion, it's E major over G sharp, and then we get our A minor chord, A, C, E, and A. So this right here looks like a normal progression, the same way that we get predominant, dominant, tonic. We get predominant, dominant, tonic. And I think it'd be the same thing here in G, predominant, dominant, tonic. We get the same progression here in the key of G major as we do in the key of A minor. So it's interesting. I think there's definitely intention there. We get some passing tones in the lower voices. And then we get C, E, A, and A, which is a tonic triad in first inversion, so no need to reanalyze, just change the figured bass. And then it gets turned back into root position on the following and, so we could just mark that as 5-3. And as we're getting ready for this perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor, we're looking at these chords and expecting some type of cadential formula, like a 2-6 or a 2-6-5 going to 5, or a 1-6-4 going to 5, or even just a tonic triad going to 5. But here we get B, F, A, D, F, A, and B, which is our B half diminished chord in first inversion, which is our 2-6-5. Forgot the diameter symbol there. Then we have E, E, G sharp, and B. That is our dominant E major triad in root position with a passing 7th in the tenor before we cadence on our tonic A minor root position. So all in all, even with the mid-phrase analysis, we're getting progressions that are normal. So right now I'm happy with the way the analysis is going. As we get later into the chorale, things start to unravel a little bit. But here, pretty straightforward, and it's an introduction to sort of what's going to go on in the rest of the chorale. All right, next phrase, we have a half cadence in the key of A minor again, so no need to analyze for a modulation. As you can see here, we have pretty textbook melodic minor. It even goes up with the raised scale degrees and down with the natural scale degrees. Even though it often happens this way, it doesn't always. So the fact that we get it in this configuration is pretty convenient. So here we get a pretty interesting progression. We get a C, G, E, and E. So the first thing we hear in our ears is a 3 chord, but immediately afterwards we get A and F sharp in the inner voices. And if we use that to further contextualize the harmony, we get F sharp half diminished. And in the same way that this D major triad is major because of the melodic minor scale, this F sharp half diminished chord is a byproduct of the melodic minor scale as well because of that F sharp. So we have F sharp minor 7 flat 5 in second inversion because it's over the 5th of the chord, and 3 is going to 6, but the quality of the 6 chord is unusual because we have F sharp there. We're definitely used to seeing a major 6 chord with that flatted minor 6th, or with that quality, the major chord, or a major chord is the resulting quality of when you harmonize the minor scale diatonically, but as soon as you add this F sharp, it becomes diminished. And then we go to B, D, G sharp, and D. That is a G sharp diminished triad in first inversion, so that's 7, 6, so 3, 6, and then 7. This diminished 6 chord often finds itself going to 7, at least in my experience analyzing Bach. And then we get a tonic triad, A, E, A, and C. Great. We get a passing 7th in the alto. Then we skip down to C here. That's a chord tone. We then get G sharp, D, F, and B natural. This is a G sharp fully diminished 7th chord in root position, so that's 7, 7. This B is a chord tone. And then we get F, or sorry, I keep on mixing the clefs up. That's been a regular theme in all of my videos. I just have like weird relationships reading staff music. It's been a long journey learning how to read. A, C, E, and A. It's where it goes. It's where it's expected to go. And this F sharp here actually gives us another one of these 6 chords in first inversion. So I'll go ahead and mark that because, it's still a diminished triad, and then we get a 5 chord afterwards. And the 6th diminished chord is very similar to 2 in a way because of the predominant character that it has, with that F sharp going to G sharp and hinting at that upward motion. At least that's how I look at it. I'm not sure if that's a conventional outlook on it, but I think it makes sense. All right, looking ahead, we have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, which is unusual based on the way that we arrive at it, because it's very similar to the way that we go to G major in the first phrase. So there's definitely some link between the fourth phrase and the first phrase, more than just the key. There's something relating the movement together as well. So immediately following this half cadence, we have another E major triad. We get the 5th of the chord going up, which just rotates one of the voices. That's all it does, and otherwise it's the same chord. And then we get A minor afterwards, right? So 5 goes to 1. That's operating as expected, but the same way that I think we're starting the phrase in A minor here, I think in this case the A minor is our common chord to the key of C major. The progression afterwards just sounds like C major. We get another 3 chord progression that just undoubtedly sounds like we've moved to major. We get dominant movement. We get like a cadential formula even. So if we call this 6, we then get G, F, B, and D. That would be our dominant 7 chord, G7. And then we get a little 7 here as well before we leap up to C, which is interesting. He interrupts the dominant motion by going down to the subdominant. It's really fascinating. Usually this G would just go up to C, but the fact that he goes down to F and then up to C is interesting. Maybe it's because the modulation isn't what the phrase is going to end with, and he didn't want it to be as permanent as G going up to C would imply. It's kind of in the same way here where this F, the G doesn't go, he never goes to C here. He actually avoids C entirely, and we just get E, we get D, but he changes direction again, and at that point we're in the key of G major, which is similar to here. He doesn't avoid C entirely, but he doesn't approach it in the way that you would expect. But we still get our tonic triad in root position here, 6, 5, 1, pretty normal progression, passing 7th in the alto. However, I think in the same way that this 4, 7, 1 progression is our link to the key of G major, this 6, 5, 7, 1 progression is our link to the key of G major, and this is now our 4 chord in root position. Now this next chord had me stumped for a bit, because if we look on the downbeat, we have E, E, C, and A, and that in and of itself is pretty straightforward. It's a 2 chord, but the fact that we're seeing it after 4 is kind of interesting. But it makes sense because we are going to a dominant chord afterwards. So 2, 6, 4. However, if we look at these passing tones in here, you can't help but also hear an E minor triad, E, G, B, and E. So we get a root position 6 chord in between these 2 chords, and it's, I think, a byproduct of the fact that we usually don't see 2, 6, 4 going to 5, 6, which is what's going on here. And it's just a little odd because, for starters, we don't really see 6, 4 chords used outside of a handful of different contexts. We most commonly see them in cadential situations where we see 1, 6, 4 going to 5, but we also see them in contexts where they're part of a passing figure, so it's like linking a 6, 4 chord that is a fifth away from the 2 chords that are on either side of it. So say, for example, like 1 going to 5, 6, 4, going to 1, 6. So you have 2 light chords on the sides of the figure, and then the 6, 4 chord in the center. Or we see it as a byproduct of the sharing of a bass, which is called a pedal 6, 4. And that type of 6, 4 chord is kind of what a cadential 6, 4 chord is as well, but cadential 6, 4s are a little bit more particular because a pedal 6, 4 is usually part of a larger figure where the bass is sustained for a longer period of time, like 3 notes. I usually say 3 beats, or not 3 beats necessarily, but the harmonic rhythm occurs over 3 iterations. If that makes sense. So when we see a 6/4 chord as a result of leaping down a sixth, that's unusual. And the fact that 2 has this passing 6 chord here to link it to 5/6 is interesting as well. It's one of those transitive progressions that I've talked about in previous videos where 6 wants to go to 2, and that satisfies the fact that there is this flow of the tonic wanting to go to the tonic, and chords want to go to a chord that is in the direction of going back to the tonic through the dominant. So 6 going to 2 gets you closer to going to 5, which wants to go to 1, as opposed to 2 going to 6, which takes you in the direction of 6 wanting to go to 3, wanting to go to 7, wanting to go to 4, wanting to go to 1, and that's not the direction that's typically taken. So this passing 6 chord is interesting. I'm not even sure if it's meant to be analyzed, but I thought I would put it there because it's honestly a 6 chord here would be more usual, I guess, than a 2/6/4 chord. Just the 2/6/4 and the way that it's spelled with the E in the bass is interesting because we get this motion where if we got E, F sharp, G, then I think we would be okay. But we have E, F sharp, E, D, G sharp. He just ends up going to D anyways. So it's an interesting choice, and definitely not consistent with his other harmonizations, and definitely not consistent with his other bass lines, at least the ones we've looked at so far. So I don't know. Anyone's guess is as good as mine as to why he did that. But that was just some speculation. Hopefully it made sense. We have a passing G here, passing tonic, and then we have an accented non-chord tone here. If that was our chord tone, it would be E, D, F sharp, and D, and that'd be like a D9 chord without a 7th or a 5th. But I think it's this D, D, F sharp, and D that's implying our tonic triad in... Apologies, I need to switch my pencil. The reason I'm not using this pencil today is because for some reason this piece of paper does not really absorb that pencil lead very well. So I wonder if this piece of paper is just an anomaly or whatever. But this 5/6 chord is just turning into a 5 root position because this D is this E is an interesting tone, but this D is the tone of interest regarding, how we're going to spell this chord. And then we get G, D, G, and B. And the B in the melody is what makes this an imperfect authentic cadence, right? Using labels. I don't know why this is any less perfect than a perfect authentic cadence, but that's just, it's just more so just staying consistent with the terminology that's been used. All right, looking ahead. So we have a very interesting phrase here. Again, I think we modulate to the key of C major before we cadence back in the key of A minor. So here we have G, D, G, and B, and one might be tempted to call that a 1 chord. However, this F natural is telling me a different story. I think this F natural is implying the fact that this G is now functioning like a dominant, and we can just say that it's now 5 in the key of C. And I think we stay in C for a while, even though we get this really interesting B flat here, and we'll talk about it when we get to it. But I think I hear this in the key of C. We have 5 going to 1/6. We've seen that before. Then we have D, A, G, and D. And we're continuing to just go down the C major scale until we get to the C sharp. He again kind of avoids C. He doesn't go to it to a usual way. He avoids C here. He's not really making C feel like the star of the show with anything other than the harmony. So the fact that we get this D minor triad here, this G is just an accented non-chord tone. The fact that we get a 2 chord here, and then we end up tonicizing it with its diminished 7th, its leading tone chord, C sharp, B flat, E, and E, which is interesting. It's a C sharp diminished triad without the 5th. So this chord is particularly unusual because of the fact that the fifth of the chord is what makes it sound diminished. So the fact that it's missing here, it's implied for sure because we have the diminished seventh. We can't refute that, but the fact that there's no G in the chorale makes me feel like there was either a typo or this is just an unusual chord, and this F natural here is just a passing tone. And the reason why I say that this isn't like 7/7 of 4 in the key of A minor yet is because the presence of this B flat, the presence of this C sharp, the fact that it's preceded by D minor as well. I would be tempted to even say that we have a brief modulation to D minor here, but it just doesn't sound like that to me. The melody doesn't really allude to any D minor. It's just like D, E, E, D, C, B. That's just as indicative of A minor as it is of D minor. So I don't think it's until this D minor right here, right on this beat, that I start to think that we get into the realm of A minor. But because we have this neighboring G here, I don't think we're quite there just yet, but we're definitely getting closer. Because if we look at this chord, we have another 2 going to, this is actually not a 6 chord because we're in the key of C major. If we were in the key of G major, this, well, this wouldn't really even make sense. We have D, we have A, we have G, and we have E. D, A, G, and E. What chord would that be? Why did I call that a 2 chord? We have the makings of the chord, however, we don't ever see it fully realized. Sorry, I miswrote that in my notes. I was the C sharp goes to where it's expected to go, but we get a bit of a interesting harmony here. We get D, A, and then we get G and E. So there's this interesting harmony that's going on this downbeat that I really think is actually just E minor, G, G, and actually I called the E minor E, G, G, and E, which is just another, which is an E minor triad in root position, and it's not these two tones that are non-chord tones. It's these two tones that are non-chord tones. What an unusual progression. We're expecting to go back to 2, but we go to E minor, but we get the bass on the downbeat that resolves the lower voices, because C sharp wants to go up to D, B flat wants to go down to A, but the upper voices don't support the lower voices as a triadic harmony. We would expect D minor afterwards, but we get this D minor, E major, or E minor hybrid, and the chord doesn't really fully realize until we get the matching of the voices. We get this like symmetrical chord, E, G, and then G and E. So the voices, the outer voices have the tonic and the inner voices have the third. So we have like this kind of like adjacent harmony situation, 5, 1, 2, and then we interrupt the adjacency with a dominant. It's very unusual, but we get 2 going to 3, and then we get F, A, F, and D. We finally get our, it looks almost like we're going to a 4 chord, but with this D in the, with this D in the melody, I was having brain fog, it's been a long day, with this D in the melody, this is where we actually get the chord. So what makes me wonder is that maybe instead of calling this a 3 chord, this is actually 2. This is a 2 chord because of the bass in the 5th. But we have a double suspension. We have a 9/8 suspension in the melody. Yeah, that has to be what's happening. We have a 9/8 suspension in the melody and a 4/3 suspension in the alto. So there's a double suspension going on here that gets reiterated in the lower voices. We get the 4/3 suspension, or the note that's being suspended over the bass iterated in the tenor, and then we get the melody suspension in the bass. and then the suspension never gets fully realized, but that's what's happening on this downbeat here, and then the bass changes. The voices still resolve, but they resolve over a different consonants. So this 9/8 turns into a sixth above the bass, and this 4/3 turns into an octave over the bass. And this is just taking this 2 chord and putting it in first inversion. So we'll just, instead of reanalyzing it, just change the figured bass, passing tone, and then we get, because we're getting ready for a cadence in the key of A minor. I think right here is where we modulate. We have the F natural, kind of like a Phrygian half cadence situation going on here, a little bit with the F going down to E. But if we call this a 4/6 chord in the key of A minor, we've now since moved past the D minor situation, and now it can be heard as a pivot chord. I think here, because we've heard C sharp and B flat too close to it, it's not D minor is more in our mind here than A minor. But if you chose to analyze this whole phrase in A minor, you could have said that the C chord was a 3 chord. But like I said, I heard this section in C, so that it is what it is. All right, and moving on towards the cadence, which is a half cadence in the key of A minor, we have E, A, and C. We have E, we have A, we have A, and we have C. Or E and A and D. I think this is just counterpoint here, because if we look at this beat, we have D, A, and C, which is kind of a continuation of this 4 chord in root position. So we can call that E an accented non-chord tone, the C a delayed 7th, but then the D happens there too. I really think that 4, it's just a big 4 chord that's being implied here, 4/6 going to 5. I really do think this is just like a lightly ornamented Phrygian half cadence, because we have F going down to E. That's the general direction, and we really don't get a fully realized like 1/6/4 chord here. We have the components. We have the E, the A, and the C, which would be the tonic triad and root in second inversion, but it never gets fully realized because the D interrupts the notes happening at the same time. There's something interrupting it. We either have the D in the upper voice here, or in the melody here, or we have the D in the bass here. So we don't ever see the chord fully realized at the same time, which is what makes counterpoint difficult to analyze. But I really think this is just sort of like a big Phrygian half cadence. Phrygian. I'm always very bad at spelling and I have to sound it out. Alright, and getting ready for our last cadence. It's perfect authentic in the key of A minor. We have G sharp, E, B, and E. That's an E major triad still, but this time it's in first inversion. We have A, E, A, and D again. Fancy that, but this D is an accented non-chord tone, and we're really just hearing a tonic here. We have all the makings of the chord. Well, at least we have the root in the 5th here. The 3rd gets introduced here. Then we get C, A, E, and B. Another accented non-chord tone where we get a tonic triad, but we don't hear it until the end. Then we get D, A, F, and B, similar to our... we had another cadence in A where we had a 2/6/5 chord, didn't we? Am I crazy? Oh, here. It was like the end of our second phrase. We have 1, 6, but instead of going to 5/3 because we have a longer duration bass line, we go to 2/6/5 here. B minor 7 flat 5 over D, and then we go E, G sharp, E, and B with the delayed or the passing 7th here. Before we cadence instead of A minor on A major, Bach often cadences using the Picardy 3rd in his minor chorales. Pretty much, I don't want to say always, but pretty much always. It's safe to bet that if you're looking at a minor chorale, he's going to end with the Picardy 3rd, ending the cantata on an uplifting note, even if the subject matter can be bleak. But that being said, this is a very interesting chorale. Lots of turns and harmonic deviations from the norm. I think all in all, this is one of the more interesting chorales to look at as far as functionally harmonic ones are concerned. Hearing this E, F sharp, G section right here was definitely super interesting. But yeah, I think I talked at length about everything that I wanted to mention in this chorale. Lots of interesting, unusual progressions as far as Bach is concerned. Or when I say unusual, I mean just ones that are relatively less common in comparison to the progressions that we're used to seeing. That being said, I really enjoyed today's analysis. It was not straightforward, but interesting nonetheless. And thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting my channel, and I look forward to tomorrow's analysis. Take care.